The temple walls shook as another bombardment struck the city's outer shields. Princess Marana pressed her small hands against the prayer stone, whispering the old words her mother had taught her before the war reached their world. The sacred chamber smelled of burning incense and fear. Around her, the last remaining priests of Velkara chanted in desperate harmony, their voices cracking as explosions rattled the ancient foundations. "They're not listening," Marana whispered, tears streaming down her violet cheeks. "The gods aren't listening anymore." High Priestess Valora knelt beside the child, her ceremonial robes stained with dust from collapsed corridors. "The gods hear all prayers, little star. We must have faith." But faith felt hollow when the screams of dying citizens echoed through the capital streets. The Krell Collective had come with ships that blotted out 3 suns and weapons that turned entire cities to glass. Velkara had no army capable of resistance, no allies powerful enough to intervene. They were a peaceful species, their greatest achievements carved in art and philosophy, not warfare. Now their civilization burned while they prayed to deities who remained silent. Captain Theron stood at the chamber entrance, his ceremonial armor scratched and dented from the evacuation. His duty was protecting the royal family, but there was no safety left to offer. The queen had died in the first assault, crushed when the palace's eastern wing collapsed. The king fought on the northern front with what remained of their defense force, a suicide mission everyone understood but no one acknowledged. That left Princess Marana as the last of the royal bloodline, a 7-year-old girl who should have been learning poetry, not watching her world end. "Captain," one of his guards whispered urgently, "the shields are failing. We have maybe an hour." Theron nodded once, his expression carefully neutral. Panic served no purpose. He'd served the crown for 20 cycles, survived palace intrigues and assassination attempts, maintained composure through political storms that would have broken lesser warriors, but watching a child pray to absent gods while death descended, that tested even his iron discipline. Marana's voice grew louder, more desperate. She'd abandoned the traditional prayers, now speaking directly from her heart. "Please anyone who can hear us. We're dying. Our people are dying. We have children who'll never grow up, artists who'll never create, stories that'll never be told. If any power in this universe has mercy, please help us. We don't care who you are or what you want. Just save us." The priestess tried to guide her back to proper liturgy, but Marana shook her head violently. "The proper words aren't working. Maybe we've been praying to the wrong gods. Maybe we need someone who will actually answer." "Child, you mustn't speak such blasphemy." "Blasphemy?" Marana's laugh was bitter, far too old for her years. "Our gods let the Krell slaughter us. Maybe blasphemy is what we need." She pressed both hands against the prayer stone and screamed into the void, her voice raw with rage and desperation. "I don't care if you're gods or demons or monsters from the dark between stars. If you can hear this and you can help us, please. We'll give anything, do anything, just don't let us die like this." The prayer stone cracked under her hands. Silence fell across the chamber. Even the distant explosions seemed to pause, as if the universe itself held its breath. The crack in the prayer stone spread, a hairline fracture that glowed with strange light. Not the soft blue of Velkaran crystal, but something harsh and red, like distant fire. Terran's hand moved to his weapon instinctively. He'd never seen a prayer stone damaged before. They were supposed to be indestructible, forged in the planet's core before Velkara had language or civilization. The light pulsed, growing brighter, and the temple's air grew cold despite the fires raging outside. "Everyone back," he ordered quietly, stepping between the stone and the princess. But Marana didn't move. She stared at the glowing crack with wide eyes, her fear transforming into something stranger. Hope? Maybe. Or recognition. "Someone heard me," she whispered. "Someone's listening." The light exploded outward, bathing the chamber in crimson radiance. No heat, no force, just pure illumination that seemed to cut through matter itself. In that light, Theron saw symbols he'd never encountered, mathematical equations and star charts and weapon schematics, all flashing past too quickly to comprehend, and voices, thousands of them, speaking in languages that hurt his mind to hear. Then one voice cut through the chaos, clear and cold and absolutely certain. "Coordinates locked. Distress call received.
Deploying response units."
ETA 6 minutes. The light vanished as suddenly as it appeared, leaving the chamber in relative darkness. The prayer stone's crack had sealed, but the surface now bore a marking that definitely wasn't Velkaran. A circular emblem with a sphere of blue and green, surrounded by geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Valora stared at the marking, her face pale. That's not any divine script I know. What language is that? English, Marana said softly, though she had no idea how she knew. They're called humans. They're coming. Theron accessed his tactical display, searching for new sensor readings. Nothing showed on approach vectors, no ships entering the system, no energy signatures indicating reinforcements. Your Highness, I don't know what that was, but we can't afford false hope. He stopped mid-sentence. His display had just registered something impossible. Space itself was tearing open above Velkara's upper atmosphere, massive rifts of distorted reality that screamed across every sensor band. Ships emerged from those wounds in physics, dozens of them, hundreds, their designs brutal and efficient, covered in weapons and armor that made Krell warships look primitive by comparison. By the stars, one of his guards breathed. What are those? The lead ship broadcast across all frequencies, the same cold voice from the prayer stone now amplified across the entire system. This is the UTSC Dante's Fury responding to emergency beacon. All hostile forces have 6 seconds to withdraw beyond system limits or be engaged. Count begins now. The Krell Collective responded with weapons fire, their mistake, and their doom. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations, dissected in tactical academies across 100 worlds, and ultimately classified as humanity's first official contact with galactic civilization. The humans didn't negotiate or posture. They'd given warning and started counting. When the count ended, they simply opened fire. Theron had witnessed space combat before. The elegant dance of energy weapons and missile exchanges, the calculated maneuvers of experienced fleet commanders. This wasn't that. The human ships moved with terrifying precision, their weapons punching through Krell shields like they weren't there. Ships that had massacred Velkaran defense forces died in seconds, torn apart by rail cannons that fired metal slugs at relativistic speeds. Energy weapons cut geometric patterns through enemy formations, and missiles swirled in coordinated swarms that overwhelmed point defense systems before detonating with nuclear fury. The Krell flagship, a dreadnought that had personally destroyed Velkara's orbital stations, lasted 37 seconds under concentrated fire before its reactor breached. The explosion lit up the system like a new sun being born and dying in the same instant. Marana watched through the temple's viewing portal, her small hands pressed against the transparee steel. She should have been terrified. These newcomers fought with a violence that made the Krell seem restrained, but instead she felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Relief. The battle, if it could even be called that, ended in 4 minutes. The Krell forces that could still maneuver jumped to hyperspace, abandoning their invasion. The ones too damaged to flee transmitted frantic surrender signals. The human fleet ignored them, methodically destroying every hostile vessel until nothing remained but debris and radiation. Then the cold voice returned, but this time directed at Velkara. Hostile forces neutralized. Deploying medical teams and emergency supplies. Unknown species, please respond. We're here to help. Valora looked at Terran, her expression mixing awe and uncertainty. Captain, what do we do? Theron studied the tactical display, watching as smaller human craft descended toward the planet's surface. Every instinct warned him about unknown aliens with overwhelming military power, but his duty was clear. We answer, he said simply. The princess called for help. Help has arrived, Jen. Mirana was already moving toward the chamber's communication console, her small fingers working controls with surprising confidence. When she activated the transmitter, her voice carried none of her earlier desperation, only dignity and gratitude. This is Princess Mirana of House Velkara, last heir to the Crystal Throne. We thank you for answering our prayer. We welcome you to our world, and we are in your debt. A pause, then laughter. Your Highness, debts are for business transactions. This is what decent people do when someone calls for help. Permission to land relief forces? Granted, Mirana said immediately, then glanced at Theron. The captain nodded approval, his hand still resting on his weapon, because trust had limits and prudence had saved his life many times. The first human shuttle touched down in the temple plaza 15 minutes later. Its exterior was scorched from atmospheric entry, covered in warning symbols and tactical markings. The boarding ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, releasing air that smelled of recycled oxygen and weapon discharge. 5 humans emerged, moving with the controlled precision of combat veterans. They wore powered armor that made Terran's ceremonial gear look ceremonial indeed, bristling with weapons and sensor equipment. But their leader removed her helmet as she approached, revealing features that were almost familiar. 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth, bilateral symmetry. yet distinctly alien. Her skin was dark, her hair closely cropped, and her eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen too much death and chosen to fight it anyway. "Captain Sarah Chen, United Terran Space Command," she said, her voice matching the one from the prayer stone. "We picked up your distress call and came as fast as we could. I'm sorry we couldn't arrive sooner." Theron stepped forward, positioning himself between Chen and the princess. Not threatening, just cautious. "Captain Theron, Royal Guard." "How did you detect our signal?" "Our communication systems were destroyed in the first attack." Chen smiled slightly. "You didn't use communication systems. Someone here," her eyes found Marana, "figured out how to jury-rig a prayer stone into a quantum entanglement transmitter. That's either brilliant desperation or desperate brilliance. Either way, it worked. The signal punched through subspace like a scream, and we don't ignore screams." "We weren't trying to create a transmitter," Valora said carefully. "We were praying." "Well, your prayer got routed to our emergency response network instead of whatever gods you were aiming for. Lucky for you, we answer faster." Chen's expression sobered. "I need a status report, casualties, infrastructure damage, immediate needs. My medical teams are standing by, and we've got supply ships ready to deploy, but I need to know what you need most urgently." Marana pushed past Theron before he could stop her, looking up at the human captain with eyes that had aged years in the past hours. "Our people are dying. The northern districts are on fire, the eastern sectors are buried under rubble, and our hospitals are overwhelmed. We need medical supplies, rescue equipment, and shelter for millions." "Can you help with that?" Chen knelt to meet the princess at eye level, her armored knee clanging against stone. "Yes, all of it. But I need something from you first. Permission to deploy ground forces across your planet. We're heavily armed and from an unknown species. I won't land thousands of troops without explicit consent from legitimate authority." "Are you that authority?" The question hit like physical impact. Marana was 7 years old, still learning court protocols, nowhere near ready to rule. But her parents were dead, her advisors scattered or killed, and her people needed help now. "I am the last of my line," she said quietly. "So yes, I'm that authority. You have permission to help however you can." "Understood. We'll start immediately." Chen stood, activating her communicator. "All units full deployment authorized. Medical priority Alpha, rescue priority Beta, security priority Gamma. Let's save some lives." What followed felt like organized chaos to Theron's military eye. Human ships descended across Velkara's surface, disgorging troops and equipment with mechanical efficiency. Medical teams in white armor established triage centers, their scanners and healing technologies working on physiologies they'd never encountered before with astonishing effectiveness. Engineers deployed prefabricated shelters and water purification systems. Combat units secured unstable areas and pulled survivors from collapsed buildings with strength augmented by powered exoskeletons. And they brought food, mountains of it, packaged in containers marked with nutritional information and preparation instructions. The humans didn't know Velkaran biology, so they brought everything: proteins, carbohydrates, vegetables, supplements, even luxury items like chocolate and coffee. "Try everything," one medic explained cheerfully. "Record what works, what doesn't, what causes allergic reactions. We'll adjust our next supply drop based on your feedback." Theron watched it all with professional assessment, cataloging capabilities and protocols. These weren't conquerors disguised as saviors. He'd seen those before. The humans moved with purpose but not possession, helped without claiming authority, and treated Velkaran civilians with genuine respect. When his guards tensed at human soldiers entering the temple, those soldiers simply stopped, held up empty hands, and waited for permission before proceeding. Chen noticed his observation. "Trust issues, Captain?" "Your people are remarkably well equipped for someone who claims this is just humanitarian aid. We're well equipped because the galaxy is dangerous, and we've learned that lesson harshly. But being capable of violence and choosing violence are different things. We answered a distress call. That's what our kind does." "Even for species you've never met? Even knowing there's no strategic advantage here?" "Captain, humanity spent most of our early history killing each other over resources, religions, and reasons so stupid they're embarrassing in hindsight. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. Then we found something that made all our differences seem trivial. The realization that we're not alone in the universe. That scared the hell out of us at first, until we understood the real terror, being alone when you need help and finding no one willing to answer. We decided we'd never be those people. When someone screams into the void, we scream back. We show up, we help, because that's the kind of species we want to be. A junior guard interrupted nervously. Captain Theron, the Northern Perimeter teams report contact. Someone claiming to be King Varak. Confirm identity, verified through multiple biometric scans. It's him. He's wounded but alive. Marana made a sound between a laugh and a sob, spinning toward Chen. My father, he's alive. Can you bring him here safely? Already moving, Chen said, her hand pressed to her helmet's communication link. Medical transport en route to his location. Your father will be here within 20 minutes, Your Highness. The princess collapsed against Theron, tears flowing freely now, not from fear but overwhelming relief. The captain caught her automatically, his discipline cracking just enough to allow himself one moment of shared joy. His king lived. The royal line continued. There was still hope for proper leadership and reconstruction. Chen gave them space, coordinating evacuations and supply distributions with quiet efficiency. Theron realized she'd positioned herself and her team to fade into support roles rather than dominate the situation. Despite commanding overwhelming military power, the humans consistently deferred to Velkaran authority on civilian matters. When King Varak arrived, carried on a human medical stretcher surrounded by medics monitoring his vital signs, Theron almost didn't recognize him. The king's ceremonial armor was gone, replaced by medical wrappings and emergency bandages. Burns covered his left side and one arm was immobilized. But his eyes held the same sharp intelligence that had guided Velkara through decades of peace. Mirana, he breathed, reaching toward his daughter with his good hand. Thank the gods you're safe. The gods didn't save us, father, Mirana said, helping him sit up, despite the medic's protests. She did. Captain Chen and her humans. They came when we prayed. Varak's gaze fixed on Chen, assessing quickly despite his injuries. You're the one who destroyed the Krell fleet. I'm one of many, Your Majesty. The Terran fleet eliminated the immediate threat. My ground teams are providing humanitarian assistance with your permission. Permission I'm told my daughter granted in my absence. She's 7 years old, Captain. The words were mild, but the challenge was clear. Chen met his eyes without flinching. She was the highest authority available, and people were dying. I needed consent before deploying armed forces on your sovereign territory. The princess provided that consent. If you wish to revoke it, we'll withdraw immediately. Theron tensed, calculating extraction protocols if the situation deteriorated. But Varak surprised him by laughing. A pained sound that made the medics fuss, but genuine. Revoke it? Captain, you saved my world and my daughter. I'm simply impressed you bothered asking permission at all. Most species with your military advantage wouldn't have. Most species aren't human, Chen said simply. We've learned that strength without restraint breeds tyrants, and tyrants eventually fall. How are your injuries? Painful but survivable, according to your efficient medical team. Varak waved away the hovering medics. I need a status report. How bad is the damage? Chen pulled up a holographic display showing Velkara's surface marked with color-coded threat assessments. Current casualty estimates are 7 million dead, 12 million wounded, 30 million displaced. Infrastructure damage is severe but repairable. The Krell withdrawal was total. They're not coming back. We've established a defensive perimeter around your system, and we're deploying early warning satellites. If anyone else tries this, you'll have more than 6 minutes warning next time. Next time, Varak repeated bitterly. You think there will be a next time? Your Majesty, we know there will be. The Quell didn't attack randomly. Velkara sits on a strategic hyperspace junction connecting 3 galactic arms. Someone wanted control of that junction and didn't care about the civilization already living here. They'll try again, maybe using different proxies. Then we're still doomed. We have no military, no weapons industry, no way to defend ourselves against species that think genocide is acceptable foreign policy. Chen smiled, and Theron recognized the expression, the same one he wore when explaining palace security to optimistic courtiers who thought locked doors were sufficient protection. That's where we come in. Humanity would like to propose an alliance. We provide military protection and defense infrastructure. You provide system access and diplomatic introduction to the galactic community. Fair trade? What's the actual cost? No species protects others from pure altruism. You're right that we have interests beyond charity. We're new to galactic politics, and we've already made enemies by intervening here. Having allies who can vouch for us, explain that we're not warmongers despite our military capabilities, who can help us navigate civilizations we don't understand, that's valuable. Think of it as mutually beneficial partnership rather than one-sided charity. And if we refuse, then we'll help you rebuild, establish those defensive satellites, provide technical specifications for basic weapons systems, and wish you well. Your sovereignty is absolute. We're offering partnership, not occupation." Theron watched the king process this, seeing the political calculations behind those tired eyes. Verac was wounded and exhausted, but he hadn't survived court politics this long by making rash decisions. "I need time to consider. Days, at least. Take weeks if needed. The Krell aren't coming back soon, and my orders are to maintain presence here until your defenses are established regardless of diplomatic outcomes." Chen gestured to her team. "In the meantime, we'll continue humanitarian operations. Your people need food, shelter, and medical care that happens whether we're allies or not." A human soldier approached respectfully, waiting for Chen to acknowledge him before speaking. "Captain, we've got a situation at the southern medical camp. Local priestess is refusing treatment, says our technology is demonic. She's influencing other civilians to reject aid," Chen sighed. "Of course she is. All right, I'll handle it personally. Your Majesty, would you or the princess like to accompany me? Might help if your people see you endorsing our assistance." Marana was already moving toward the exit before anyone could object. Verac tried to stand, failed, and looked at Theron with frustration. "Captain, go with them. Represent the crown and ensure this doesn't escalate." Theron saluted and followed Chen and the princess out into the temple plaza, now transformed into a logistics hub. Human ships came and went in precise patterns, cargo containers stacked in organized rows, medical teams triaging the endless stream of wounded. The scale of the operation was staggering. He estimated 10,000 human personnel on planet already, with more arriving hourly. The Southern Medical Camp was a prefabricated facility the humans had erected in less than an hour, complete with operating theaters and recovery wards. Outside the entrance, a Velkaran priestess stood shouting at a crowd of civilians, her ceremonial robes torn and dirty, but her voice strong. "Unnatural powers. They tear ships from the sky and heal wounds with machines that mock divine providence. This is corruption, damnation, disguised as salvation." Chen approached calmly, her hands empty and visible. "Ma'am, I understand we're frightening. We're aliens with technology you've never seen, showing up uninvited and changing everything. That's terrifying. But people are dying while we debate theology. Can we at least agree that saving lives is good, regardless of methods?" The priestess turned on her, eyes blazing. "You don't understand anything. The gods test us with suffering to purify our spirits. By removing that suffering artificially, you deny us spiritual growth. With respect, the gods didn't show up to fight the Krell. We did. And suffering doesn't purify anyone. It just hurts. Your people are dying from injuries and diseases we can cure. Letting them die when we can help isn't piety, it's cruelty. You speak of cruelty while bearing weapons that erase ships from existence? While wearing armor designed for killing? You are demons, and I will not let you corrupt more souls." Marana stepped forward, her small voice somehow cutting through the growing crowd noise. "High Priestess Sakara, I know you. You blessed me at my naming ceremony. You taught me the prayer songs. Do you remember what you said the gods value most?" Sakara's certainty wavered. "The gods treasure compassion above all virtues. Look at these people." Marana gestured to the wounded civilians watching the confrontation. "They're hurt and scared. The humans can help them. Maybe they're not what you expected, maybe they don't fit our holy texts, but they answered our prayer when the gods didn't. Isn't that worth something? The gods work in mysterious ways. Then maybe the humans are the mysterious way." Mirana's voice cracked with emotion. "I prayed for help and they came. I don't care if they're gods or demons or something else entirely. They're here and they're helping and we need them." Sakara stared at the princess, her certainty crumbling under the weight of a child's desperate logic. Finally she bowed her head. "I cannot argue with the last heir of Velkara. If you command me to accept their help, I must obey." "I'm not commanding. I'm asking, please." The priestess looked at Chen, then at the waiting medical teams, then at the wounded civilians who needed help. "Very well, but I will observe their methods. If I see them harming souls instead of healing bodies, I will speak against them regardless of royal wishes." "Fair enough," Chen said immediately. "You're welcome to observe anything we do. Medical procedures, technological specifications, military protocols. We've got nothing to hide. Ask questions, demand explanations, hold us accountable. That's how trust works." Sakara nodded stiffly and stepped aside, allowing the waiting wounded to enter the medical facility. The crowd dispersed slowly, tension easing but not disappearing. Theron made mental notes about civilian attitudes and potential resistance. The humans had won the military battle easily, but cultural integration would be harder. Over the following days, Theron watched the humans work with professional admiration. Their efficiency was remarkable. Temporary housing appeared across devastated cities, agricultural support teams deployed with seeds and equipment compatible with Velcarin biology, and engineering corps began rebuilding critical infrastructure. But what impressed him most was their patience. When civilians were afraid, humans slowed down and explained. When cultural misunderstandings arose, they adapted their methods rather than demanding compliance. When Velcarin traditions conflicted with practical efficiency, they found compromises instead of forcing solutions. They weren't perfect. There were incidents, arguments, occasional friction between human soldiers and Velcarin civilians, but they acknowledged mistakes, apologized when appropriate, and adjusted procedures accordingly. King Varak recovered quickly under human medical care, his burns healing with technologies that seemed impossible. He spent long hours in discussion with Chen and her diplomatic team, negotiating alliance terms with careful precision. Theron attended many of those meetings, watching his king fence verbally with humans who matched him for political acumen. "You keep saying this alliance is beneficial for both species," Varak said during one session, "but the military balance is absurdly one-sided. You could conquer us without effort. What prevents you from doing so once your presence is normalized?" Chen pulled up galactic maps, highlighting thousands of star systems. "Your Majesty, humanity currently controls 37 systems. The galaxy contains billions. If we wanted an empire, we could find uninhabited systems and build colonies without conquering anyone. We're here because we genuinely believe cooperation beats domination. Plus, there's practical reality. We can't be everywhere at once. We need allies who will help defend their own space while we handle threats elsewhere. Shared defense networks, coordinated intelligence, mutual support. That's stronger than any empire." Pretty words. But history teaches that powerful species eventually exploit weaker ones. Human history teaches the same lesson. We've been both oppressors and oppressed, conquerors and conquered. We know exactly how that cycle works and where it leads. We're trying something different because we've seen what happens when we don't. Jen leaned forward, her expression intense. "We're not asking you to trust human nature. We're proposing a treaty with specific obligations, verification protocols, and termination clauses. You'll have access to our military specifications, our government structure, our economic data. Transparency prevents exploitation." Varak considered this. "And if your government changes? If new leadership decides conquest is preferable to cooperation, then the treaty includes withdrawal procedures and we leave. Your Majesty, we can't prove we'll be good allies forever. All we can offer is demonstrated behavior, contractual obligations, and mutual advantage. The rest is faith, and I understand that's a lot to ask from someone whose world nearly ended." The negotiations continued for 3 weeks. During that time, Theron watched Mirana spend hours with human personnel, learning about Earth history and human culture with insatiable curiosity. He worried briefly about inappropriate influence, but the humans were respectful, answering her endless questions without trying to shape her opinions. "Why do you fight so much?" she asked, one human Marine, watching footage of historical conflicts. The Marine, a scarred veteran named Rodriguez, considered carefully. "Lots of reasons, Your Highness. Resources, ideologies, misunderstandings that spiraled into violence. Humanity's made every mistake possible, and some we invented ourselves, but we learned from those mistakes. Every war taught us something about ourselves, usually something we didn't like. Eventually we learned that working together beats fighting each other. But you still have weapons. Lots of weapons. Because knowing how to fight and choosing to fight are different things. We keep weapons because the universe has species who didn't learn the same lessons. They see cooperation as weakness, so we stay strong enough to protect people who can't protect themselves, and we use that strength carefully." Mirana absorbed this, her young mind wrestling with complex ideas. "Captain Theron says, strength without wisdom is dangerous. That's why we have rules, chains of command, accountability. Every weapon we build comes with restrictions on how it's used. Every soldier takes oaths about protecting civilians. We're not perfect at following those rules, but we try." Terran listened from nearby, reassessing his initial judgment. These weren't naive idealists pretending violence didn't exist. They were veterans who understood war's reality and chose restraint anyway. That was more dangerous than mindless aggression. Disciplined violence in service of specific goals, controlled by people who understood when to fight and when to stop. The alliance treaty was finalized on the 32nd day after first contact. King Varric signed on behalf of Velkara, establishing formal diplomatic relations and mutual defense obligations. Chen signed for humanity, binding the United Terran Space Command to protect Velkaran space and provide military support against external threats. "This is a historic moment," Varrock said during the signing ceremony, his voice carrying across the partially rebuilt palace hall. "Two species from different stars binding ourselves together in shared purpose. May this alliance bring prosperity and security to both our peoples. To new friends and better futures. Humanity stands with Velkara." The humans began withdrawing ground forces immediately after, reducing their presence to a permanent defense garrison and diplomatic mission. They left behind technological gifts, agricultural equipment, medical supplies, communication systems, and detailed specifications for defensive weapons. Not enough to threaten galactic powers, but sufficient to discourage casual aggression. Theron found Chen preparing to depart, supervising final equipment transfers. "Captain, a moment of your time?" She turned, eyebrows raised. "Of course, Captain Theron. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you, professionally and personally. You saved my world, protected my king, and gave my people hope when we had none. That matters." Chen's expression softened. "We did what anyone should do, but thank you for saying so. And Theron, keep questioning us. Keep watching for warning signs. Trust is earned through consistent behavior over time, not dramatic rescues. Hold us accountable to our promises. That's how good alliances work. Fair warning, I'm very good at my job, and my job includes identifying threats before they manifest." "Excellent. We need allies who will call us out when we screw up, not yes-men who let problems fester. Stay vigilant, Captain. The galaxy's dangerous, and Velkara needs protectors who don't blink." She departed with the main fleet the next morning, leaving the garrison under command of a Colonel Martinez, another veteran with the same carefully controlled competence Theron had learned to recognize. The humans settled into their assigned territory, establishing proper protocols and communication channels with Velkaran authority. Life slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Cities rebuilt with human engineering assistance, incorporating defensive architecture and shield generators. The casualty lists were finalized. 8 million dead, a wound Velkara would carry for generations. But the survivors lived, and the planet endured. 3 months after first contact, Marana sat with Theron in the palace garden, watching human patrol ships transit overhead on their regular security sweeps. "Captain, do you trust them?" Theron considered his answer carefully. "I trust their current behavior and their demonstrated values. Whether that trust extends indefinitely depends on continued observation and mutual respect." "Why do you ask, Your Highness?" "There are species that conquer through force, species that conquer through economics, and species that conquer through cultural assimilation. I'm trying to figure out which kind the humans are. And, what have you concluded? Which might be the most dangerous kind, because they don't see their own influence spreading, or the kind who genuinely aren't conquerors and I'm being paranoid. Both might be true simultaneously. They're changing our world just by being here, whether they intend to or not. But change isn't inherently bad, and they're giving us tools to navigate that change on our own terms. The question is whether we use those tools wisely." High above, a human destroyer flickered across the stars, its weapons dark but ready, guarding a world that had prayed desperately into the void and received an answer from demons who turned out to be something else entirely. Neither demon nor god, just human, flawed and dangerous, and trying very hard to be better than their history suggested they should be. And for Velkara, for now, that was enough. In orbit, the UTSC monitoring station logged another quiet day. No threats, no incidents, just routine patrols and diplomatic exchanges. The log entry concluded with a brief note that would be filed away and forgotten until historians discovered it centuries later. Species contact number 1 proceeding nominally. Velkaran integration stable. Recommend continued patience and cultural sensitivity. They're good people who got hit hard. We help them rebuild. We gain allies. Everyone wins. Chen was right. This is who we want to be. And in the palace, a young princess studied reports and treaties and histories, preparing herself for a future where gods stayed silent but demons answered prayers with warships and mercy in equal measure, and the line between the two became something worth questioning rather than something worth fearing. The prayer stone in the temple remained cracked, that strange human symbol etched into its surface, a permanent reminder that sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected sources, and the universe was stranger and more hopeful than any theology predicted.